Welcome to the King's Corner. The Long Walk is a dystopic horror novel written by the author Richard Bachman, or as he's more properly known, Stephen King. Published on December 1st of 1978, or July 3rd of 1979, depending on the source, the book is a little something special. Namely, according to the King himself, he claims to have been the first novel he ever wrote, having started it a full 8 years before his first officially published novel, Carrie. Now, despite the fact that this book is a... Alright, I'm dropping that. Now, despite the fact that this book was about half a century old as of my recording this, I was surprised to find that there was a rather light history on this novel, all things considered. Not that there isn't anything to say about it. One interesting thing about it is that the landmark year of Y2K, the American Library Association listed The Long Walk as one of the 100 best books for teenage readers published between 1966 and 2000, which seems like an arbitrary year to start from, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. In addition, as many know, The Long Walk received its first official film adaptation in this year of 2025, which is still in theaters as of the time I'm recording this video, and probably will be by the time I publish it. Apparently, they've been trying to make an adaptation of this novel as early as 1988, when George A. Romero was approached to make one. And then Frank Darabont got the rights of it and sat on them until 2018, when he lost the rights to the film. Overall, not much else could be said. Even trying to find what King himself thinks of the work in retrospect, I could only find that King once said that he had written 5 books before Carrie. 2 were bad, 1 was okay, and 2 were good. And the 2 good ones that he named were Rage and The Long Walk. So at the very least, I can say that King at least thinks this book is a good book. I guess an interesting thing to consider is that if it was written in the year of 1978, you could almost say that King inspired the survival games genre. Though that would be a unfair thing, I think, to grant him credit for. Especially when you consider that The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell was first published in 1924. A good 54 years before The Long Walk was out. But I guess you could say that this was the first book that added the televised nature of it, turning the barbarianism into spectacle. I have more to say on this deeper on in the review, but for now... And let's move on to... the covers. Now, I've said this before in the King's Corner, and I'll say it again here, but reviewing Stephen King covers is kind of an exercise in utility. Not only is Stephen King one of the most well-known authors of his time, of our time, even, considering how many of his works have been adapted into highly popular horror films, but considering the relative age of this book, it's likely there's been dozens of covers over its life. And I'll be honest, I picked this book up solely because of the name of its author, and honestly little else. Not the art on the cover. And Stephen King has honestly earned that right. Because so far, what I've read, I've enjoyed his books. But that being said, based on what I've seen, all the covers are pretty functional. I mean, they get the point across pretty quick and in a surefire way. I don't have much else to say on them. So let's go ahead and move on to the synopsis. Now, since I've gotten, again, no feedback at all on how I've been trying to do my TBRs in the last few videos, I'm just going to say fuck it and go back to what I had been doing when I hadn't published TBRs. I'm going to read the back of the book in this video and add in my 2 cents at the end. What I think the book misses out on in the synopsis and what I think is relative to need to know for the review. I read the back of the book because I believe that it helps set up a foundation for the book itself, and that a bad synopsis can lead to unfulfilled expectations in the book. I have pointed out a couple times before that the back of the book gives me the wrong idea of the book, so I read most of the book thinking, okay, well, this isn't what I was promised, and that made the experience lesser for me. So, for this book is, against the wishes of his mother, 16-year-old Ray Garrity is about to compete in the annual grueling match of stamina and wits known as The Long Walk. 100 boys must keep a steady pace of 4 miles per hour without ever stopping, with the winner being awarded the prize, anything he wants for the rest of his life. But as part of this national tournament that sweeps through a dystopian America year after year, there are some harsh rules that Garrity and 99 others must adhere to in order to beat out the rest. There is no finish line. The winner is the last man standing. Contestants cannot receive any outside aid whatsoever. Slow down under the speed limit and you're given a warning. 3 warnings and you're out of the game. Permanently. And honestly, yeah, that's pretty fair. It's not unfair to say that, it's literally the premise of the book, but this book is a walking simulator. So yeah. But the real question is, what did I think about this book? Well, I'm kind of on the middle of the road on this one. I did like many things about this book. I like the characters. As like normal, King is able to write a series of characters that feel like real people. And we see the resulting madness and effects that the long walk has on the various victims of it as time goes on. Considering that the entire book is just our main characters walking, as that is both the threat and the action, this is a very good thing about the book, as the characters are the one thing about the book that's going to be carrying most of the story. Who they are, how they act, what their goals are, their relationships with each other, how they break under the strain of the long walk, all of it is done in such a way that you never really get bored with the book as you get closer and closer to the end. You never get to the point where you're just like, oh my god, will this thing just end already? I won't lie and say that the book is always super gripping. There were times where I was starting to drift off, and there were more than a couple sections where I just kind of... Is that really necessary? I won't lie. Stephen King is definitely one of those authors that it's like, I like you, man, but why are you being so weird? Like the time where Garrity has a daydream that causes him to... Said it, look me dead in the face, ask cash or credit, and I shizzed in my pants. Because I at a certain point, I'm just sort of sitting here wondering, why is this scene relevant? I mean, I get why it happened. I get the context around the scene, considering the events that led up to it. But at the same time, why did this scene happen? It doesn't affect Garrity any further past this point. It's not relevant when it happened. It just sort of happens so King can write about a kid, checked my phone and saw you rang and I... But I would say otherwise, the King does a solid enough job getting you to know the characters are meant to know most of the time. Most of the scenes are relevant to their characterization. To the point that seeing their deteriorating mental states kind of gets difficult to read at times, as it's meant to be. I like some of these characters, and you definitely find yourself rooting for more than one to survive near the end, whoever they may end up being. There's no really designated villain in this, necessarily. There is one, but he's more of a overarching figure. There's no one in the long walk itself that really feels like you're just meant to hate them. Okay, now, and while these compliments may sound small, there are actually very two major points in favor of the book, considering how, well, straightforward the book is. But I do have to be honest, there are some things about this book that really left me wanting. For one, you can definitely tell that this is one of King's earliest works. His work with the prose and his descriptions feel a lot more bland than I'm used to with him. And I've mostly read his older works. He doesn't always have a perfect word choice throughout the story, but the sentences flowed well together, and there's never really a point where you feel like you're just kind of stumbling along with his reading, even as early as Firestarter. And when they didn't, it was a purposeful choice of the book to do so, to emphasize a point, like a character going mad, or a character struggling with their own thoughts in an extreme scenario. In this book, especially near the beginning, it just felt like it was jittery and hesitant. Like King wasn't sure how to explain what he was writing, and you can see him in real time pausing the words to think about what he's going to write down next. If that makes sense. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read a passage near the beginning, and it's going to serve as a two-pronged point. The first is to give you an idea of the clunky writing style I'm talking about near the beginning, but it's also kind of to show you there's a sort of mean-spiritedness in some parts of the book that didn't feel right. Honestly, this whole scene kind of just made me while I was reading it and just kind of want to move on. Like being a third party at some domestic dispute that you really like you were invited over to a friend's house and now you're watching his parents fight and you just kind of like sitting there like. And this is literally page 4, by the way. His mother was also tall, but too thin. Her breasts were almost non-existent. Token nubs. Her eyes were wandering and unsure, somehow shocked. Her face was an invalid's face. Her iron-colored hair had gone awry underneath the complication of clips that were supposed to hold it in place. Her dress hung badly on her body, as if she had recently lost a lot of weight. "Ray," she said in that whispery conspirator's voice that he had come to dread. "Ray, listen." I'll be honest, I don't understand this scene. Why is there such an air of casual cruelty to Garrity describing his own mother? Like, as far as we know, Garrity has no issue with his mom throughout the story. And furthermore, Garrity's mom is the only thing that he has left in terms of family, as far as he knows. And again, there's another one of those scenes like, man, why are you like this? Did we really need to know that she didn't have boobs? What relevancy did that have to the scene? But anyways, you see how stunted that part felt? How it felt like it kept stopping as King's like, okay, how else can I describe her? Okay, what about this one? But I think my biggest issue that I really do want to talk about this book is the titular Long Walk itself and the world we inhabit throughout the story. Because, I mean, yeah, sure, there are tidbits, and I do like how King basically drip-fed us parts of this world without clunky exposition. I can figure out that this world exists in some sort of alternate reality, where the US is underneath a totalitarian regime headed up by a figure known only as the Major. He's a spiteful man who hides behind his menace behind the guise of patriotism, and criticism of him and his policies are often met with soldiers and threats. I mean, what a totally fake and fictional reality, huh? But what I mean is, tell me more about the Long Walk itself. Apart from its rules, why does the Long Walk exist? How did it become this beloved sports event or this game show? What role exactly does it play in this totalitarian regime? Why do people actually like the Long Walk? Why do people seem to want to be in the Long Walk apart from the prize?
But the prize.
One of these important things about death games in fiction is, well, establishing why that death game exists in this world. In the Hunger Games, the titular games are because the districts rebelled and they're held annually in order to basically kick the surviving districts while they're down, reminding them of the capital's superiority while also being reduced to entertainment for the denizens of the capital. It's very clearly a take on class warfare in the most extreme way. In universe, the reason the Hunger Games exist and is ran by the Capitol is it's meant to show how cruel they are, how casually they're reminding people that we'll just take your kids and kill them if you dare fight us. Or let's take Hunger Games Contemporary, Battle Royale. In Battle Royale, the setting is largely the same. The world takes place in an alternate reality where in 1987, Japan is controlled by a totalitarian government after Japan won World War II. The reason the students are put into this game is because the government is worried about dissent from the younger generation. So they force one classroom at random to fight to the death to remind the citizens of the regime's absolute power. That they can take you and kill you at any point. In fact, they can take you and force you to kill each other at any point they want. It's a critique on authoritarianism while also exploring the effects society can have on its youth. Or we can take something as obscure as FWF. There's no explanation given to why these games exist, but there is enough there that the lack of explanation can make some sort of sense. It's a supernatural event. Nobody really knows how the games happen, how they work, or anything like that. But throughout the book, we even see that the game makers that do run the games have a sort of sadistic joy in the deaths and torment they cause. So we can at least figure that there's some level of genuine enjoyment for whatever is making these games. That even if it's as simple as I just like watching these people die, the games exist for a reason. The author didn't need to explain further necessarily why the games exist, only that they do, and the narrative is designed in such a way to allow that to be sufficient. While I still have many questions about the nature of the game, it was never about why the game exists in the first place. It was always about why do people like this? Why do governments allow it to occur? You know? The Long Walk provides really none of that. It clearly not some form of regime reminding people how powerless they are, as all the Long Walk contestants are there entirely by choice, given multiple opportunities to back out after they've been accepted, and at no point is it ever implied anyone was forced into this against their will. It is implied that some people who did it to get certain attention were chosen out of spite, but they weren't forced to be there. It's clearly not some random thing that just occurs, as it's clearly shown to be a prized baby to the Major, to the point that criticizing the Long Walk can get you Gestapo'd. People clearly don't really enjoy it. It's not even a day into the walk before most of the walkers admit they were dumb to do this. And it's strongly implied that the reason crowds show up and there's so much public national support is because, to my point earlier, we're critiquing the Long Walk as dangerous. It's safer to show that you support the Long Walk than to just not show up and not watch it. The game makers of the Long Walk don't seem particularly sadistic. The soldiers who basically have to kill the contestants treat it with a clinical detachment. Most of the deaths are over quick and fast, with no one really dragging it out for the sake of sadism, except for one, and that's for a very specific reason. And the walk isn't unfair to any one person more than the others. And furthermore, there is a genuine prize at the end, where the winner can request anything that they want, as far as I know, and they will receive it. The losers aren't treated like losers, they're treated like brave souls who just couldn't make it. They're valorous people who supported this Long Walk. So what exactly is the point of the Long Walk in this story? Why does it exist? Where did it come from? How did it become so big? It does sort of reason like a critique on a game show genre, though if you'd ask me, this was during the time period of the Newlywed Game, the Dating Game, The Price is Right, and Family Feud. It doesn't really feel like it can be critiqued by having the contestants push their mental and physical limits. Now, nowadays it definitely can read like that when you have games like Survivor, Fear Factor, The Moment of Truth, Beast Games. Then I get it. Like, if you read it like that nowadays, it's perfectly valid. I mean, even if King wanted to critique the scandals of the 21's trivia game, where he rigged the answers, you'd think there'd be moments to show where the game is being rigged in favor of certain contestants, and someone like Garrity, or maybe Garrity's the person that it's being rigged for, would notice the genuine unfairness. Like maybe he's getting just a little bit longer than everyone else when he slows down. Or maybe his water's like got something in it that makes him feel energized. Or maybe he's getting a little bit more food than everyone else. That kind of thing. Or maybe the point of the Long Walk is something that's been lost with time. Maybe it's as deep as saying the totalitarian regime keeps their power by pitting people against each other, but showing that people are the strongest when they work together. Characters like Stebbins and Barkovich are loners who are basically by themselves the entire walk. But they do make it far. But people like McVries, Garrity, and Olsen get just as far as them by working together and challenging these characters in their own turf. Maybe it's about the futility of competition, as the story, small spoiler by the way, does end with the implication that Garrity, despite winning the Long Walk, dies of exhaustion shortly afterwards. Maybe it's a comment about how the youth will be exploited by regimes and totalitarian governments, preying upon their nationality, their patriotism, or lofty ambitions to put them into things that they find out later will completely destroy their lives before they're fully aware of what they're going to agree to. Or maybe it's just another critique of the Vietnam War. I mean, according to King, he literally wrote it when the Vietnam War was at its height. Honestly, there's so many ways I can take this book. And while that can be a good thing from one point of view, it's definitely a showcase of how themes can evolve as books get older. The timelessness of how, if certain books are written the right way, you can read it differently depending on the time period you're from. A little bit like Fahrenheit 451. But at a certain point, I'm kind of just asking, what is it trying to say? If a book can be saying anything, is it actually saying anything at all? Or is it just handing you a blank piece of paper and telling you to write your own story? And while that's fine to a degree, is that really something I'm going to praise? If I'm writing it, obviously I'm going to enjoy it. Overall, at the end of the day, I think I'd give this book a 6 out of 10. Of the King's book that I've read for this channel, I can honestly say that this is among my least favorite. Not that I dislike the book. Let's be fair, the previous books were Firestarter, which I loved, The Dead Zone, which I really liked, and Christine, which I also really liked. The Long Walk just sort of felt like it existed as a King book. It certainly was interesting, and I can promise that it's not every author that can make me read a 400-page story about a group of people walking down the road. But at the same time, it's technically the worst King book I've read on this channel. Although this has kind of got me thinking that the only book I can say was a more traditional horror novel from King that I've read is Christine. Dead Zone, Firestarter, and now this one felt more like thrillers with edge. Whereas Christine was actually about someone dealing with a supernatural element that ruins their lives and their friends' lives. Maybe next year, when my King's Corner comes around, I'll probably do something a little more traditional. Maybe Pet Sematary, Misery, or heck, if I start reading it now, maybe I can finish it. God, that book is so big. But as it stands for this book, honestly, it is something that, yeah, you can read it if you want. I won't discourage you from reading it. It is definitely something that I think is an interesting dive into people losing their minds, realizing the flawed systems of their government as they go on. But I honestly don't think I can earnestly say that this is a King book that you just have to read. Like, this is one of his best. It's very middle of the road. That's it. That's all I got. It's not great, but it's good enough. With that being said, just remember, with every book comes an adventure, and every adventure's worth having. Even the bad ones. See you later, everyone.